Hi, this webinar today is Person-Centered Planning. Kathee Scoggin will be the presenter. I'm Katie Humes, I'm the moderator. I'm just here to welcome you, and if you're just joining us, go ahead and type in your name in the chat box, or if you're watching the recording, we're glad you're here. First of all, we want to say thank you to the children, families, and service providers who make videos possible. While we all know that we're not perfect, it's hard to have videos of ourselves where we might not be doing exactly what we wanted after we look back. And we might say, oh, rats, I wish I hadn't done that. So it's a really big deal to have videos of families and educators and children. So we want to thank them for that. So this webinar is on person-centered planning. It's worth it. And this is part 2. You'll find part 1 on the webinar, on the website. For this training, you will need 2 examples, Ben and Maddie. They're examples of person-centered plans that are located on the website right near the recorded training, the part 1 that you would have watched by now. And now I'd like to introduce Kathee Scoggin. She's the co-director of the Washington Deafblind Project and a woman of much wisdom. Kathee? That's just a nice way of telling me a wise guy. So good afternoon, and we've got a small group today, and sometimes that's a lot of fun, and we're also recording this for people who couldn't make it today. I appreciate people being understanding of needing to cancel the last one due to my illness. So with that, I'd like to talk a little bit about the outcomes for today. And it's an opportunity to analyze and translate the information from a person-centered plan into an educational objective for the student and activities and schedules. Identify how to facilitate the group discussion and identifying goals and objectives for the student. And by the group discussion, I mean the people who attend the person-centered plan. And then also identify how you might use the person-centered plan in the future following the conclusion of a person-centered plan meeting. Also, just so you know, we will be sending out the PowerPoint tomorrow. Michaela will be doing that. And also there will be an evaluation that we're requesting people take at the end of the session so we can get feedback about what works and what doesn't work. We are, what is it called? A project in process. So we want to make sure that we're responding to the needs of people who are facing day in and day out classroom situations. So this is just a quick review of the first session that was recorded, and that is, remember that it's a meeting about the student, and it's not just a person-centered plan, but it's person-centeredness. Really staying focused on that person. The child is the starting point, the center, and the end of all curriculum decisions, John Dewey said way back in 1929, before any of us were born. And I think it still holds true, especially for this group of students who have multiple disabilities and may have a combined vision and hearing loss. It is not about us. It's not about our forms. It's not about what we think we ought to do. It's not about what our district typically does. It's not what we have in the classroom. This is not about us. This is about the person. So here's a quick reminder. This was up on the last PowerPoint also. The purpose of a person-centered plan is to get to know the student and what she wants in life. And I want to remind people that oftentimes we're talking about children who are nonverbal, who are not able to say, gosh, when I grow up, I want to be, or I want to make sure that I live in an apartment in New York City, which is what one student we've worked with said, and wanted a fashion life in New York. However, many of our children don't have the language with which to communicate it. However, they do have ways of showing us what they like, what they prefer, and what they don't like. You develop a list of likes and dislikes by observing that student, by interviewing family members, by interviewing people that are often with that student, who have a connection with that student. So you do know what they like, and you also know what they don't like, and they show that by distaste. Either it's a facial expression, a movement, pushing something away, moving away from something. All of those it's as if they were sitting in the room saying, this doesn't work for me, for you to change my routine. Now, they didn't say it, but in essence, they did say it as long as we are close observers. To understand the dreams of student and family members. And again, the dreams. What are the dreams of this child who's not able to talk in the language we are used to? And part of it is their dreams may be that we do 5 different recreation and leisure activities or play activities with them, and by repeating them frequently for a while, we find out what things they like, and it may lead us to where that dream might be. To establish a record of past and current events for future reflection, and to serve as a basis of meaningful educational and life planning. And I'm emphasizing the meaningful because I keep hearing from teachers and paraeducators and other people working with the students that I just don't know if these activities are meaningful. And by meaningful, I mean meaningful to the student, to the child, not to me. And then the challenges reminder also, all people participating and viewing the person through capacity-colored lenses. And we talked a little bit last time about thinking about their capacities. And oftentimes we are pushed, especially in the field of education and social work, is to look for the negatives. What is it the person can't do, which then qualifies them for something? Well, in this activity, it's about talking about what do they do. A parent who says, when I've had a long, hard day at work and I come home and my child is sitting on the couch and I get close to them and they have a great big smile, that's capacity. They have the capacity to uplift us in some cases. Also, the challenges of having a good facilitator, someone who has a vision for how this person, for thinking about what this person can do in the future and who they can be. It's also the challenges of process for using the information and reviewing the plan and collecting student progress data and school district staff person who's in charge of keeping it going. If I go into a school district and I facilitate it, that may be okay. But the reality of it is somebody has to be there who is sold on it and passionate about keeping this going, because it is not a one-time thing. All people staying focused on the student, not what they as participant thinks are possible or not possible. And oftentimes, unfortunately, we don't have high enough expectations because we don't have enough experience to see what these students truly can do. Just one second. I just did something here. Okay, so what I'd like to do is go ahead and before we hit this one, I'd like to have you listen to a parent who shared a couple years ago at a parent panel about her child who is deafblind and what happened around the idea of a person-centered plan. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and have Michaela bring that video up. And this is Jeanette talking about her daughter, Sarah. And what we're going to do is when it comes up, which it hasn't yet, we're going to go ahead and when we see the picture of Jeanette, a very happy-looking mother, I would like you to take a look at this and think in terms of a family that you may be working with and thinking about how this would work with this parent and her ideas, and maybe even sharing this with a parent. So we'll now go down to the bottom of the screen and push play now.
Hello, I'm Jeanette Paracchio. I live in Connecticut, mother of Sarah, who had Cornelia de Lange syndrome, which means that she had low vision and hearing, small in stature, but I learned a lot from her. When Sarah was 9 years old, she had attended 7 different schools. She was outplaced by our district, and with that background for her schooling, she had 5 teachers, 10 paraprofessionals or paraeducators, several OTs, PTs, and speech therapists in our neighboring towns. When she was 9, our town decided to bring her back to district and to create a program for her to meet her needs. And during that time, she entered kindergarten. She started in the elementary school at age 9 and started in kindergarten. And I was very happy with that placement, and they were working on socialization, snack time, circle time, all the things that she needed to learn. And I was happy, my husband and I were very pleased that Sarah just remained in kindergarten. She was the same size as the kindergartners. She wasn't able to write her name. She didn't know her colors and numbers. They were working on the same skills that the other programs had helped Sarah with, but she hadn't accomplished those skills yet. And at that time, we had a person-centered planning session, a MAPS. It's like planning for her future. And we were asked how we viewed her in high school, after high school, what our dreams for her were. So we said when she turned 21, we expected her to move out of the house like our other 2 children and get a home with roommates and supports that she needed out in the community. And during the mapping process, we discussed with the people in our group, how is Sarah going to do that? She's in kindergarten now. How will she jump to adult services? And they said, can she go from kindergarten to adult services? And we just looked at each other and said, I don't think so. You have to go through all the stages in the educational system. She would have to go to middle school. She would have to go through high school. It made us very scared and apprehensive, but it was the best thing that she actually did make it through all of the different levels of schools in our town and went out into the community to a home after high school with her peers.
So one of the things that I thought was very, very useful in all of this was hearing a parent talk about the idea, and the team, by asking a question, got her and her husband thinking outside the box. And I think that that's really what part of this is all of us thinking outside the box. And every person who knows and cares about this student has important information to contribute. This is a parent that who really just wanted to, quote, protect her child. And that's true of what all parents want to do. And she had an opportunity to take a look at that. So I was really excited about having this. Sorry about all the background noise. We were in a hotel at a conference, and so it's a little tough to get at everything we wanted right. Okay. So keep in mind the fact that by inviting the bus driver, who may be one of the students' favorite people, that bus driver probably has some very important information to share. Don't limit yourself. And we talked about this last time, about who you might invite. And again, I want to remind everyone, including myself every time, that the person-centered plan can be an ongoing process to face challenges. Because there will be obstacles and challenges, and we have to figure out some way to resolve those. And it's also a chance to think about a person in a new way. And we also talked about that last time. So this is a quick reminder about all the different areas or sections of a person-centered plan. As you may have already noticed, that in both Ben and Maddie's, not every one of these are present. It may be that the team had made a decision that they didn't want to do certain sections. It may be that they didn't know to do certain sections, or how important some of those sections were. And some of them just have to do with people starting out new and experimenting and experiencing and learning from it. We all do that. So if you have Ben's example in front of you, that's why I really wanted people to have them with them. I want to take a look at just some questions. And what sections, number one, we'll just make this real simple, what sections did you actually find in Ben's plan compared to all those we named? And I've renamed them here so you can look at them and double check and make sure you know which ones even showed up in Ben's plan. So the personal life history was there, relationships with people, that was there, preferences, his likes and dislikes, what worked and doesn't work, and then hopes, dreams, and fears were there. What was missing was a health portion, a personality, places, choices, respect, and communication. There was a little bit of communication in the one section on page 6, kind of interwoven in the goals, I noticed, and there was a little tiny bit of health history under the first part, the personal life history. Now, looking at that example, what sections did you find most valuable on Ben's plan? What did you notice that as you were reading about Ben that you felt like you were starting to get a sense of who Ben is? So if you would like to type in the box, that would be great, in the chat box, and identify which sections you found most helpful and why. Well, one of the sections that I found really helpful was the whole issue of relationships. When I got to that page, which was page 3, it talked about the relationships at home, the relationships within the friends and community, and the relationships which were more professional because the child went to school or went to a doctor or whatever. So that was one of the areas that I found really useful, which told me he has a lot of access to people, and there are quite a few people. Some of the person-centered plans I've looked at have very few people on them. And so one of the things that relationship shows for me as I start to say, gosh, here is a wide range of people that we can access for this student in a variety of ways. So that's one section that I always look for very strongly to see how big that group is or how small that group is. Big or small is not the issue, but the larger the larger the group, the more breadth that student has of being able to access and do a variety of things in the community, in the neighborhood, and in the school. Katie, did you have a sense of any that you were thinking a section that was particularly helpful to you? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
You mean on the sample ones or in a PCP I've been in?
Actually either, Katie, but I was thinking in the case of Ben. But talk about one you've been in, too.
I think that really asking parents about their dreams and fears, a lot of times those aren't directly, the question isn't directly asked. And I think some unusual things, sometimes some things you don't expect come up in that question.
Okay. And I see a note from Kristen. And Kristen, they were on the website. There were samples, and we sent them out with the first session. I thought we did, but for sure they're on the website, and so you can refer back to that. And so this is going to sort of be you seeing it sight unseen, unless there's some way for you to access it, print it, and still stay in this. So with that, I think the hopes and fears, Katie, I think those are good. The other section that I find useful is the whole preferences, the things that work for Ben and the things that don't work for Ben. So for example, one of the things I looked at, because here I am trying to analyze, now I've got all this information, what do I do with the information? And what we often see is people go through the person-centered planning process and then nothing really happens with it. People don't sit down and say, now that we have all this great information, what do we do with it? Why would we want this information? How would it translate into IEP goals and objectives? It might translate into activities. It might be that we found out that the student just loves elevators. And so in the school, there's an elevator because there happens to be 2 stories, and the student loves the elevators. And so one of the things they got through communication with that student is that student needed to use a card that had a picture of the elevator, and the student handed or pointed to that card to let them know that they wanted to go use the elevator. And that's how it started. So my knowing that the student loves elevators says, okay, so he loves elevators. I'm working on communication. I'm trying to get him to initiate something. The only thing he's going to initiate is something he really likes, and we happen to have an elevator in the school. Isn't that great? And so those are the ways you start matching the information together and thinking, okay, I got that. So with communication, we're trying to get him to initiate, and that's what we do. So the whole thing about likes and dislikes. Another thing is he does not like having things on his hands. So that's a what doesn't work for me. And that's an important one too. That means my putting my hands all over his hands is probably a real dislike for him, and he may not want me involved with him as much if I'm going to keep putting my hands all over his. So I want to experiment and find out, would a hand-underhand approach work better with him? He doesn't like high-pitched sounds. And so the question is, what's some of the kind of music we have involved? Are there a lot of high little sing-songy things that little kids listen to, or do we go for things that have a little bit deeper bass to it that's going to be more enjoyable? So that I might present him with classical music, something he's never been exposed to. And I go, oh, okay, so I'm going to expose him. In the beginning, he might not like it. But if I try it a few times, it might be that he just needs to get used to it. Okay, and so that's the way we start analyzing and using the information. And that's the tricky part. Conducting it is important, is conducting the person-centered plan is very important, and having a good facilitator to help draw people out is very important, and to stay positive in the what we call the capacity, what the child's or student's skills and pluses are, all the things they bring with them that are positive, and then and not staying so focused on the negative. So so we talked about that. Oops, let me just go to the next one. Whoops. So I'm not sure. There we go. So let's look at some short-term goals for Ben. So if you were responsible for developing one activity for Ben as a result of these short-term goals, and let me read a few of those, Kristen, especially for you and anybody else who didn't have a chance to print it off. Some of the short-term goals were being toilet trained at both school and home, able to find their way around the school independently, increase his expressive communication, understand time and space, initiate an activity that he likes or wants to do, share who he is with his peers. So those were some of the goals and objectives. So thinking about the daily living skills of toilet training, getting around in the environment, also getting something he wants, being able to increase his expressive communication. So considering that, and what I'm going to point you to is that you'll see 4 icons, and one shows a smiley face, which are the emoticons, emotions, and if you just run your cursor over it, one is you can press it and then you can step away or step out of the room and let people know you're gone. Another one is hand, for raising your hand if you want to ask a question, and then the next one shows the opportunity that you can vote for A, B, C, or D, or none. But I'd like you to think about, if you were responsible for developing one activity for Ben as a result of those short-term goals, what might it be? A, to develop a menu of conversation topics that Ben can use when he's talking with people. B, to start a calendar or schedule with Ben and have representations of his day at school. C, maybe develop a choice board for Ben so that he can identify the different things he likes to do. And then D would be all of the above. So what I'd like you to do is, if you would hit the one under that icon, A, B, C, or D, as to which one you think it is true. I'd like you to do that, please. Okay, I see a B from one person. Oops, I may be missing something here. Just a second. I see an A from Katie. Anybody else want to hazard a guess? And again, it's up in the area. There are the 4 boxes for emotions, being away, raising your hand. There we go. And so I also see Michaela says B, and Kristen says D. And so it's real interesting. What I'd like you to do is just take a moment and think in terms of, why did you say the letter you did? Because this isn't, there is no, quote, right answer here. It's, why did you say what you said? And if you would just type in the box, what made you think about putting the letter down that you did? I think I see some people typing. I said A because this would be a way to build on his likes and his communication. Right. That's a good answer, and it links the two. And that's the part we're practicing on today, that whole idea. His short-term goals, one was regarding time and space and having a scheduled calendar, might be a basis of other goals. And you said develop one activity. So thinking about that, that's another answer that would be totally acceptable. to give Ben information about his routine, to see how much he understands about time, to give him some power of choice, and to help him communicate with others. So, Kristen, you took a little bit broader view of, gosh, you could do all of those, and those would all enter into the expressive language, into, as Nancy said, the idea of giving the sense of time and space with a calendar and a schedule, and then the idea of coming up with a menu of things that Ben understands that he could communicate with other people about. So one thing he might want to communicate with other people about is elevators, since that was on his likes list. Great. Thank you all for participating. I appreciate it. Oh, and Michaela, and I thought it would be a good way to make a map of the day so that he could see what was going to happen. So that's another piece in here of his being able to anticipate what's going to happen. Thanks. So a section that Ben did not have certainly was the health section, a places section, a respect section, and communication section. So think about why you would want to know Ben's health information. And just take a moment to consider that. Why does it matter if there's anything we know about his health? Now, we all know we want to know, does the child have seizures? Is he on certain kinds of medications? We know that some medications actually interfere with vision for a child. It may be blurry. It may be double vision right after they have the medication. So we want to know those things. But why else would it be important? So I'm going to give you an example of health information that was given on a student. They told me that the minutes in school on a daily basis for this child was 390 minutes, that the minutes needed for toileting were 135 minutes per day, and so this child was not able to change themselves. They had to be changed. They had to be moved in a wheelchair. They had to be moved out of the wheelchair, up onto the changing table, changed, then back into the wheelchair, back to class. Minutes for working with therapists was 60 minutes a day. Minutes for tube feeding was 40 minutes a day. Minutes for suctioning was 20 minutes a day. And the minutes in the classroom, including music, PE, and library, were 135 minutes a day, which actually left 2.5 hours out of the 6.5 hours left. And that sounds amazing, but people were concerned about the progress the student was making. They were also concerned about the huge number of goals and objectives that were set for this student, given the amount of time that the student had other health things that had to be done. Now, one of the things the team ended up doing was, by having this information, they ended up sitting there and saying, well, while the student is toileting, what kinds of things could we be working on? Have we integrated communication? Have we used picture communication with her? And could she be directing us what to do next, so that there was communication, so that there was sequence? So it was them starting to look at, gosh, we're not taking advantage of all those medical health issues. We're not doing enough in that area, and we could be using it to forward some of her goals and objectives that were set. Now I want to go to one for Ben. So here's an example of health information given on Ben. Ben has upper respiratory infections that frequently causing him to stay home and miss school an average of 3 weeks a year. He doesn't use a hanky or Kleenex to blow his nose. He only likes to eat pizza, pasta, and foods high in refined sugar and carbohydrates, and he only likes to drink fruit juice. He does not like to walk or stand any more than necessary. So I would like you to look at those. And I don't care if you just pick one thing or you pick the overall picture, but tell me how this information about Ben and his health might guide an objective or learning activity that we would want Ben to have. And then when you think of that, could you type it in the box, in the chat box, please? So one thought was maybe some sort of hand-eye coordination game with Ben in a walker. So if he needs to use a walker, it's getting him to possibly do something, okay, that is more movement-oriented, which would be better for his overall health. Any other thoughts? I see Kristen's typing, so I'm going to wait, and then I'll express one of my thoughts. Teaching him to use a Kleenex to blow his nose would be a good goal to help him later in transition. Yes, and also, would that lead to better hygiene and therefore fewer upper respiratory infections? I don't know. It might be using Kleenex and a hanky, and it might also be washing his hands frequently, or using the sanitizer, whatever works, so that he has less of that exposure. So it's that idea of, gosh, I want to start some goals and objectives around him understanding that we need to wash our hands or clean our hands frequently to not get sick. Another one that I looked at was the idea of the two last ones, and I'm going, okay, so lots of carbs and sugar, and then he doesn't like to walk or stand any more than necessary. I'm just thinking about, gosh, what kind of recreation and leisure things might we develop? And I might want to ask questions about what are the kinds of rec and leisure things, movement. Does he like to run as long as he's holding on to somebody's arm or someone's holding on to the cane? You know, what kinds of things might I do there? And the reason I'm looking at that is because what we continue to see is when students graduate from high school who have a combined vision and hearing loss or multiple disabilities, when we contact families, oftentimes we still hear things like, you know, I took my 35-year-old son to the doctor. I knew he was sick, but I had no idea what was wrong because he couldn't communicate about what was hurting him. And one of the things we found out about that student is he has a very, and I hope I get this right, so one of you guys from the project correct me if I'm wrong, or you, Kristen, and that is he has a very high tolerance for pain. And so he doesn't feel pain the same way. And therefore his body's reacting and is getting sluggish, etc. But it's not because he can identify where the pain is. So those are some things that I start to look at is health-wise. What are the things that student needs to start to understand concept-wise so that they actually can start to have a hand in their own health? I just recently met a young man, and he had this great book at home. He has a lot of allergies, and this book, he starts to identify by pointing to the picture of what it is that's causing him. Are his eyes starting to water? Is his nose starting to run and stuff? That he's starting to learn how to deal with and express that something's wrong. I can start to feel there's something's wrong, and oh, I see, my eyes are itching, or my eyes are runny, or my nose is running. So that he is starting to get the idea of this is the cause, this is what's happening, and gosh, the cause was I went ahead and I snuck a couple cookies that are made with regular flour, and that's one of my allergies. So those are some things that we want students to get, and they do, and he is I would say semi-verbal, but not real verbal. And so this has been really interesting for me to watch him start to get some control over communicating with people. And I'm pushing this area of health very strongly because so much has to do with how well we feel in life based on how our body is. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to go ahead and I want to show another video clip, and let's go ahead to that one. And this one, I want you to look at the connection that this student starts to develop. This is the paraeducator's very first day on the job. And so there is someone guiding him. Mark, who used to work with our project, is guiding her through this activity of making a connection. And that's all about what a person-centered plan is about. It's about making connections. So if you go down to the bottom of the screen and push play now.
And if she does it little like that, you do it little too. There you go. Yeah, good, both hands, exactly. Now go with, like, if she uses her right hand, use your left so that your hands are lined up. So in case she goes to look for them, yeah. Oh, other way. 2 now she's touched you. This is really good. Three times. Nice.
Okay, and in that case with Stephanie, one of the things that happened there was the communication piece. And some people said, what do you mean about communication? And the issue is that Stephanie started a topic, which was slapping her hand and then scratching with her fingers with the other hand. And what happened was, with that, because that new paraeducator followed her lead and followed what Mark suggested about keeping her hand there so that Stephanie could find her, they made a connection. And it is all about connections. And as we do a person-centered plan also, it's about our connections within the school, within the community, within the family. It's all about having connections and helping her have connections so that it does not become a life of isolation, which is so often what happens for many of our students as they get older. Okay, so now I'd like to go to talk about Maddie. So Maddie was the other example, and it was also the same place that Ben's was. And I want to talk a little bit about that piece. So with Maddie, I'd like you to be thinking about what sections did you find in Maddie's plan. And so I'm going to, and Christian, I'm not sure that you can access that right now, so I'm going to go through it a little more quickly. The person-centered plan includes these sections, and the ones we found in Maddie's were personal life history, relationships, personality, preferences, places, communication, hopes, dreams, and fears. So that was a beginning. So it was more than what we saw in Ben's. So one of the questions that I thought about when I was reading the two different ones was that I really felt like I got more of a sense of who Maddie was than Ben. And part of the reason was the fact that there was stuff about her personality. It talked about things that mattered to her. There was a more detailed beginning history, personal history, so I kind of saw what the family has gone through as well as Maddie. But the who is Maddie, these are some of the things that the team said. You know, she's a people person. She says hi to everybody. She's non-judgmental. She loves to laugh and joke. She imitates things like sneezes. She likes to communicate. She is kind and considerate. She can be hard-headed, persistent, but that also means that she works hard. She can be mischievous. And she doesn't always know the difference between funny or serious. So in some cases, she's ended up missing some of the concepts that are part of serious versus funny. So that was one area that I felt strongly, and feel free that if you've had a chance to look at that, the rest of you can chime in, certainly. They had a great list of what works for Maddie and what doesn't she like or what doesn't work for her. And some of the things were shopping doesn't work for her. Crowds don't work for her. A change in her routine does not work for her. She hates stuffed animals, anything furry. That bothered her a lot. So those are things that I'm going to think about. If we're going to do an activity and there's something furry in the activity, right off the bat, I've set her up for not wanting to be a part of the activity, whether or not the activity would have been fun if it had been with something else. So I'm going to, this is a little bit older student, and one of the things I would ask you is, okay, so let's consider the fact that she's older. She's getting ready to leave high school. And I want to think about a job. So we're thinking about life after high school, hopes and dreams that she might have a job. So that's one of the things that came up on the hopes and dreams page, was the whole idea of being able to have a job, and that would consider her needs and likes, and also a variety of jobs, because she got bored easily. She had an experience of shredding at the high school, and she was great at it for about 20 minutes. And after 20 minutes, you could start to see her looking around. She was sort of, the thing I noticed the day I was watching, and she didn't realize I was probably about 20 feet away, she would put the paper into the shredder, and then she would hold it and bring it back up, so there were all these little shredded ends, and then she would run her hand under and play with it. For the first 20 minutes, she never thought about doing that. And this happened day after day after day. So the whole idea of, gosh, you know, a job for an hour may not be workable for her. It may be something different that she has to do. The other thing I liked was the fact that they said she was a people person. So the question becomes, she was by herself shredding. She wasn't working with anyone. So that job, she may have stayed at it longer had it been a job that involved another person. So I think in those kinds of terms, what is it that I see on there that tells me, gosh, maybe shredding would be okay for 20 minutes, but I need to make sure she has another job that maybe she can go longer at. And sure enough, they found a job at a local grocery store, and she started working in the produce section. And she worked for 45 minutes and eventually an hour and a half to 2. So those are some things that I start looking at with this person-centered plan. And she did have a person-centered plan when she was much younger, and so I asked the mom if she had by any chance kept it, and the mom hadn't. And she said, I know it's somewhere, but I have no idea where. And I would have really been interested in seeing if anything had changed or had things stayed the same. So for a couple students that I've seen do a person-centered plan, and then 3 years later when it was time for the student to have a third-year assessment, they updated the person-centered plan, and then 3 years later they did the same thing. We saw some huge changes, and then we saw some things that were just part of that child's personality, and therefore they don't change. But it was very important, and one of the exciting parts was they did a health section on this student, and we saw the student's health getting better, and that was a very exciting opportunity, we thought. I'm going to go forward. So the things that I found most useful were also the section on communication. And so there was one on receptive communication, how Maddie understands other people. And then there was a section on how other people understand Maddie best and how she communicates. And that was very useful, especially when they got to some of the dreams. And let me just find one. And so their dream was a life meaningful to her, which I thought was very interesting. Job, community, interactions with others, leisure, and earning some money. New experiences, and repeat them so they become familiar to her. A life as independent as possible for her. Learn more vocabulary and use it, whether it's spoken, signed, tangible symbols, picture symbols, it didn't matter which one, and to have some real friendships. And when I looked at Maddie's relationships, there were many fewer relationships than I saw on Ben's. And so I started looking at, here is a student who may not go as many places or may not have as big, as large a group of people to connect with, and yet here she is a people person. So it starts to become, how do we work into her goals and objectives and into her schedule an opportunity to widen her opportunity to meet people? And I want to go back to Ben for just a second, and that was the idea that with Ben, one of the things they talked on the last page that's talked about other topics discussed, they were coming up with pros and cons about Ben moving on to middle school. And there was a lot of discussion about his placement for this next year. And one of the things they talked about was the fact that, well, gosh, when Ben becomes an adult, there are people that will be in his community if he keeps moving along with his own age group. He needs to make friends with his own age peers so that he can see the kinds of things his own age peers do. That there are classes that Ben could possibly be included in, such as band or PE. He's going to have to move up sometime. Do it while there is time to make an easier or smooth transition. Some of the reasons not to move him were he's small in size and fits in with the younger children. He knows the people working with him and they know him. He's used to the routine at his current school, and younger children are comfortable with Ben. So just thinking about that idea of, if I don't continue to move with my peers, then I may be losing some opportunities for friendships because I stayed back and the peers I got used to and who got used to me moved on and moved on and moved on. And so slowly the question becomes, do I have a way to establish a set of peers? So those are questions that I start looking through the PCP again and start as a team, start kind of tossing those back and forth and brainstorming, gosh, what do we want to do? How can we do this? How can we help Maddie make a larger group of friends, develop a larger group of friends? So if you were responsible for developing one activity for Maddie, what might it be based on some of those dreams? And I'll just quickly repeat a few so that you all can start typing. And those dreams were the fact of being with other peers, having real friends, increasing comprehension as well as expression in communication, a life as independent as possible, a life that's meaningful to her. That would be a job, a community, interactions, leisure, earning some money, new experiences that she can repeat so they become familiar to her and understood. So one activity that I thought about for Maddie was the idea that what I knew was that on Fridays they had a different kind of day. And one of the things that they did was every Friday they would go do different activities in the community. But they would try to do a different one every Friday and not repeat. And so we talked about what would be the value of repeating going to that same place or doing that same activity. And so one of the things we talked about was doing a new activity that she didn't have experience with, and bowling happened to be one of them. And they went bowling, and what they decided to do was every 6 weeks they would bowl. And so that was one way that people looked at being able to do it. I want to show, I've been back and forth on this, and I think for those of you who viewed the video, the recorded webinar from last time, you may have seen this video already, but I want to show it for a couple reasons. And actually, no, sorry. So one of the things I want to think about is the idea, good, find opportunities in the community for her to volunteer, great, and have a goal of using public transportation to get there. Another great one, what's one of the things that adult services tell us often is that transportation becomes one of the biggest issues for students once they're out of school, and sometimes even when they're in school to get to work or appointments or whatever. So that's a great one. If you're out in a rural community where there isn't that kind of transportation, it becomes, is there some way else to get someplace that makes sense? Let Maddie help the teacher, like passing out papers, picking up papers. It helps her feel independent, and she still gets to interact with the children. So she hands out the papers even though she might not be doing that paperwork, but she hands out the papers. Or for a student who may not be able to get around very well, and you may have read in her history that she has some balance problems, the issue becomes that maybe the students would get the paper from her. So you kind of kill two birds with one stone by saying, gosh, this is working on her independence, and it's also working on her interaction and ability to interconnect with others. Okay. Yeah, Katie, I know that transportation, it's awful. So just take a moment and think about one of your students. And what sections do you think would be the most valuable right now if you were going to just do one or two sections? And we talked about this last time, that you don't have to do a full person-centered plan with every single section covered. It might be that you decide, one team I know has decided that every 3 months when they get together with the family, they're going to do the next question in a person-centered plan. So there's a variety of ways you can do it. But think about your student and which areas do you think would be most useful that you haven't thought about doing or you have thought about doing? Maybe the preferences and the communication to help motivate him. Okay, great. Anybody else? Oops, I think I see a couple people writing. Communication, likes and dislikes, hopes, fears, health, and that's not all. Thanks, Nancy. Yeah, there's a benefit to all those sections. But sometimes there's something that just is sticking right at me because it seems to be so in the foreground on some students. Oops, I think Katie still might be typing.
Kathee, I'm just trying to put in there how to find the samples on the website for future reference. So you can go ahead.
Oh, okay. Got it. So thinking outside the box, one piece about this whole area of person-centered planning and growing up, whether you're 3 and you're growing up to 5 or 10 growing up to 12, we talked about a person-centered plan doesn't just have to be for a student who's 14 or 16 years old. It's the whole issue of self-determination. And it implies that there's an independence, but it implies that there's an interdependence. And we all are interdependent. We like to think of ourselves as being 100% dependent, but that's not true. Think in terms of what is something you are interdependent with another source, person. Anybody have a thought about that? Well, any of us who divide up responsibilities in our home between us and a spouse or us and our children, the reality of it is we are interdependent. We are depending on them. And for some of those things, it's something I can't do. Okay, so in some cases, my husband does a certain thing that's a repair on our property that I can't do. Could I learn to do it? Yeah, maybe I could. But the reality of it is I don't know how to do it. And so I'm interdependent on him. And Michaela says, yeah, everything, parenting, expenses, etc. We are an interdependent society. But we talk about independence. So I just want to clarify that. What I'd like to do is think in terms of, gosh, self-determination, that's choice-making, it's decision-making. And so I'd like to show a video of a little girl named Catherine. And I'd like us to take a look and listen to the person talking. I thought about doing this one totally silent, but changed my mind because there's some great understandings this person is getting from this experience of feeding this little girl. And so with that, this is Catherine and her paraeducator. They're doing feeding. I'd like you to keep an eye on the way that the adult holds on and tries as little as possible to hold on to Catherine's hand. She tries to do as much hand under hand. And pay attention to the amount of control that Catherine is exhibiting versus many children we feed who we're feeding them in such a way that they don't have control. So let's push play now.
Didn't even let go.
Another shop said.
See, she forced it almost down there. Oh my gosh.
What did the sheep find when they explored the world?
Okay.
And to see and treats to eat. Animals that didn't have thick woolly coats to keep them warm. From that day forward, the flock shared their wool with all kinds of little animals that needed help to keep warm. This made a sweet sheep happy. That's interesting. The sheep were happy. Why do you think they were happy, Mohammed? Did it make them feel happy to share their wool with others? Benny, think of a time when you helped someone. Does it make you feel good when you help someone? Have you painted for somebody?
On the wall.
Really?
On the bathroom, on the kitchen.
You painted? Did you help Mom?
Jason.
And Jason? And that made you feel good because you helped? Yes. Good job. Okay. Page 9.
She's gonna tell me she's done.
That's what I'm wondering.
The
I would
story
take it
says
as
the
that.
sheep are sweet. What do you think that means?
I'll try some juice.
What does that mean? They. When you say. Yeah. Who is the story about?
I see
The poor rabbits look cold. What do they need?
They need a really
A really warm jacket? Yes, you're right. Something to keep them warm. What is she going to grow?
vegetables and
Oh, vegetables and fruits. Okay. Okay, go ahead. Then cast
Ah, there you go. See, this is the way she's done it in the past. It's just kind
then cast plant
That whole thing about now I've got the control.
was grown in
of, oh, I'm so glad you're here.
So tell me, Ahmed, what do you know about casts? Yes.
And it's got some juice in it.
Did you what?
I put some juice in it too, yeah. So,
Yes.
So we're not comparing apples to oranges here. Or we are.
we are. Literally.
There are many animals in the forest that are hungry in the winter. Give the animals treats. What is Cass going to do with the food she has grown?
Oh, that was a give it to me.
animals that are
So again, that whole idea of that Catherine is given the opportunity to control something, and that's some of the self-determination, that she gets to make the decision when she's done eating. You could see where the paraeducator was putting the spoon as well as the syringe with the juice in it in close to her mouth, but waiting until she opened her mouth. Waiting for her. In the beginning, Catherine didn't use her hands at all on this feeding thing. But at this point, Catherine is now the one who is guiding and pushing that aide's hands to get what she wants when she wants it. And she's part of holding on to the spoon as she's feeding herself. But when she's done, she's done. And so oftentimes people talk about self-determination in terms of middle school and high school and adults. And it starts when you're very, very young. The more control that you give the child over what they're going to do or how they're going to do it, that you're preparing them for taking on more and more responsibility for deciding things. One of the things that one of the teams I know talked about was that they really wanted the student to make some decisions and tell them what to do. And so one of the things we talked about was that the student has a lot of different nurses. And so we did pictures that identified each one of the steps of doing the feeding for her. So it would be, first we need this, and it was a picture of the first thing they needed. Then here's the picture of the second thing needed. So more and more she was able to direct what was to be done to her. She couldn't do it for herself. She just didn't have the hand strength. She couldn't make her hands move the way she wanted, but she could touch the picture to say, this is the next thing I want you to do. Here's the next thing you need to do. Here's the next thing you need to do. So that whole thing about self-determination, and it also implies that the child hasn't learned yet how to be helpless. And learned helplessness is a real issue for many of our students because we do so many things to them or for them. And doing to and for them all the time and not helping them find ways that they can direct us or do it for themselves really pushes down the motivation. I was thinking about, Kristen, something you typed in earlier about the issue of motivation, and that's part of the learned helplessness. Kids learn not to be motivated anymore because in their brain somebody's done it for them so many times that they believe they're incapable, that they can't do it right. And we see learned helplessness in all of our lives if those of us pay attention. This paraeducator got really great at watching Catherine and observing when Catherine was moving her hand, the paraeducator's hand, where she was exerting the force. And that's the piece we were talking about earlier, that if we're good observers, we can start to see what those likes, dislikes, what's working, what isn't working, what are things I might want to do when I grow up, and what are things I don't want to do. And it all starts at even a younger age than Catherine. So that's why this part is being brought into the person-centered plan, because it has to be a huge piece, whether or not the student's directing it or whether or not the student's learning how to do it. And so motivation becomes an issue. And so one of the things, it's about motivation, but it's also learning to have self-esteem based on things I realize I can do myself. And so I'm going to show this video, and I think it was shown the last time too, but I want to show it for a different reason. And one of the things I want you to notice about Drew is that when Drew is picking up the wood, there is a point at which Drew puts his hand in towards his body and hits his body a couple times, which is the sign for myself. And look at his face as you're watching that too, and see whether or not you think this is a young man who is proud of what he's doing. So go ahead and push play now. So in this case for Drew, when he was signing the myself and smiling, he had an activity that he felt confident in that helps with self-determination, because if I can do one thing well, I can do another thing well. The other point it makes, and for those of you, you might have not heard anything, and we did it silently so people would really pay attention to what was happening visually. There was a lot of distracting auditory sound, which we cut out. So one of the other things that I want to add to it is, number one, what is self-determination? It's personal control, empowerment, power, the right to chase our own dreams, our likes, the right to make mistakes and experience consequences, the right to make choices and enjoy those consequences, and the right to ask for help or ask not to be helped. No, thank you, I don't need you to lead me across the street because that isn't where I wanted to go in the first place. The other point I want to make is that reliance on the service system alone limits the individual's opportunities. And it's something that's great about a person-centered plan is this is not all up to one agency, one system to do everything. It's up to a group of people who have come together to support this young person becoming everything they can be and kind of knocking out barriers and obstacles. And when you have a facilitator who can do that, who can talk about that, then it doesn't become such a burden. That experience that you saw for Drew, that was something the family figured out. There's not a way that school could have done that. But they found something as a family. So it's also helping thinking about activities that are outside the, quote, school day, whatever that means. Another one of the students that we talked about, when they were looking for a job for her, the person who actually found the job for her was her mother. It was a grocery store they shopped at all the time, and the mom made friends with some of the people who worked at the store. And then when she went in, and her daughter went with her all the time, and people would always say hi to her, and because her daughter loved people, Maddie, because her daughter loved people and liked to be around people, they saw what a pleasant person she was. And so when mom said, yeah, we're looking for some kind of a work opportunity for her, and, she doesn't have to get paid, but, well, hey, let me talk to my boss and see whether or not we could use her in the produce department. So it's that thing about sometimes our reliance on the service system alone actually ends up limiting that individual's opportunities. Would the school have ever found a job for her in a grocery store or even thought to find a job? We don't know. But that's why a person-centered plan is so great, because it's looking outside of just the people who work with the student at school. And so I want to end up with some stuff about collaboration. What is the one thing you can change when working as a team member? Anybody want to hazard? It's one word, and it's 2 letters, and it starts with M. Anybody got an idea? Yeah, moi. Oh, well, of course, somebody had to go and do 3 letters. But yeah, me. I'm the only one I get to change in collaboration. I don't get to change anybody else. So it's up to me to see what I need to change. And facilitating group discussions effectively. And have you ever felt this way on a team? I mean, I've seen teams like this, and I've been the one over on the other cliff feeling like whatever I've got to say doesn't seem to work with what everybody else is doing. And part of this person-centered plan is an opportunity for me to learn where you're coming from and for you to learn where I'm coming from. There are goal structures that affect how teams interact and the outcomes. Some people are competitive. It's a win or lose. So it's negative interdependence. There's individualistic. I just work independently. I've got no interdependence. I don't need to depend on you. I'll just do my way when I work with the child. And then there's cooperative. Help and support other people. The positive interdependence. How do I support the rest of the team? And what do we decide we're going to focus on? So here are 10 qualities of an effective team player, and the reason I'm bringing up the team player is it's also about teams and how they play. It is not just about the person who does the facilitation. So Demonstrating reliability, communicating constructively, listening, functioning as an active participant. So I don't like what you have to say, so I'm just going to fold my hands over my chest and I'm just going to be quiet the rest of the meeting. That's not functioning as an active participant. Sharing openly and willingly and saying, I just don't see it the same way the rest of you do. This is how I see it. It doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means this is how I see it. Cooperating and pitching in to help. Oh gosh, somebody needs to find, maybe we could make a little room for this child or a space for active learning, and somebody pitches in and says, I've got some stuff in a box. I'll just bring all that in and we'll see what anybody could use. Exhibiting flexibility. Can I be flexible, or does it have to be exactly my way or the highway? Showing commitment to the team and respect. Working as a problem solver. What's the problem here? And how can we solve it? Not let's just keep having the problem. And treating others in a respectful and supportive manner. And I've gone to team meetings where the teams, everybody walks in, somebody hands that piece of paper to everybody. They go around and everybody reads one of those so that the whole team is reminded at that exact moment, this is what we need to be doing as team members. Think of somebody you think would be a good facilitator for a person-centered plan. There are some districts that actually have identified and trained people in their district to facilitate a person-centered plan. So let's go back and look at that list. And can you think of some other qualities that you think are needed for a facilitator that maybe aren't on that list? Maybe through your experience of being in a person-centered plan or even in a team. What are other qualities for somebody who's facilitating it that you really appreciate? Humor. Yeah. Another quality that I don't exactly see here that I think about is I want the facilitator to have a vision. I want them to be able to have maybe a vision I don't have so that they kind of see a pathway where they're going. Can respectfully move things along when they get stuck. Yeah, there are people that may monopolize the conversation, and it might be about, okay, so what I heard you say was blah, 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 and I've got that down. So it's one of the reasons we often suggest people do writing so that if somebody starts going on and on and on, that it's like, let me see if I can capture this in just a few words. Patience, but determination. I need to be willing to listen out to people, and I know how I am, and I'll just express for myself, and that is sometimes I want to move it along. It's like, okay, I got the idea, so I want to finish the sentence for the person, and when they finish the sentence, it wasn't the sentence I thought they were going to finish with. And so I go, oh, okay, Kathee, just zip it and listen. This person has something to say, and you're trying to turn it into what you think she wanted to say or he wanted to say. No hidden agendas, another good one. Hidden agendas are useless other than really destroying, I think, a good team. Tolerant and understanding about the parent's tears or anger or fear. Another good one. From the parent's perspective, what's going on? What do I need to understand? And can you delegate? Another good one. For those of us who think we have to do it all, the best thing is to see who in this group is willing to do this, and who in this group is willing to do this, and so, because you talk so much about that community center. Could you maybe stop in or call the community center and find out what things are available at what time of the day? And get a schedule where they might just need to go on the website and do it. But once they've done that, they have something invested. So those are other things. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I got interrupted. So those are things that are very, very important that are not on this list, but they are so crucial because the idea is for all of us to walk away, feel heard, and come up with a plan. And I saw this article, and it's called 5 Tips for Thinking Outside the Box that I thought was great, and I added this. And it's more for me for thinking outside the box, because that is what a person-centered plan is about. It is about thinking outside the box. And sometimes I have to change the context. I need to maybe have us meet in a room we never meet in, or not even at the school. We meet in a local community center, or at the family's home, or somewhere else, so that right out of that box, I'm not in my usual box, school. And so I step out of that right off the bat to try something new. Some of the things, I've never learned how to belly dance. So maybe I need to try something new because that helps me step out of the box, not just in dancing, but it helps me step out of the box everywhere. To question my thoughts and my words. Gosh, if I say this about the student negatively, what is the other side of that might be positive? So this child is very stubborn and she wants her own way. And instead of saying, she's very persistent. She knows what she wants. That's a whole way of changing my thoughts and my words. The plan to be spontaneous. If I'm spontaneous, I can possibly change anything. So if I'm spontaneous in other parts of my life, maybe I just changed and I went to school and said, okay, today we're going to do math first instead of reading. Now I know I keep saying to everybody, do a routine and follow a sequence. But every once in a while, by changing that up, and when that student has a signal for him that there's going to be something different today, whether it's a tactile symbol that means something different, or whether it's a picture, or the words that I always repeat and say, up, change up, something like that, it throws everybody into something more spontaneous. And it's like, woo, something's different. And that's that mix up the way you think also. So I just wanted to throw those in, and I gave a website that you can go to read a little bit more about it. But I thought that there were some great things in there for a facilitator as well as a team. And then there's the ongoing use. The ongoing use of a person-centered plan. One of the things that happens is people do it and then they forget about it. So identifying the person or the position of the keeper of the person-centered plan. Have a backup person or role for this. Who's going to keep it? Who's going to bring it back up in front of us a couple times a year, or at every IEP, or before every IEP, or before the third-year assessment? Who's going to determine the next time to review the plan and set a date right then and there and determine the purpose of the review? What do we want to review out of it? Consider doing the original person-centered plan or a review of it in preparation for a comprehensive eval or IFSP or IEP. It helps determine present levels of performance and assessments, and identify new participants on the plan review. When a student is transitioning to a new school or program or teacher, invite the receiving team. We're out of time, and so I do want to end with a person who can't make a mistake can't make anything. So keep that in mind as you're watching this last videotape. And following are some references which you'll get tomorrow. They'll be sent to you. And the issue of never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. It's the only way that ever has. And Margaret Mead said that, and that's really what a person-centered plan is about. We also have a new literacy website up nationally for kids who are deafblind, and of course that's our contact information. So we're going to end with a student that I interviewed several years ago. And this was a mother who later said to me, you know, Kathee, I made a huge mistake. I was so busy figuring out how to drum algebra and stuff into my daughter's head that I forgot one of the most important things. And so this is an interview with the mom and the young woman. So with that, we're going to push play now.
Kristen, can you talk to me a little bit about your social life?
About what?
About your social life. Who are your friends? What do you do with friends? Or do you mostly do things with your family?
You mean with friends?
Uh-huh.
I don't have lots of friends.
Oh.
I only have one really best friend who's been friends with me our whole life.
Oh.
We used to have someone we lived right next door to back on Marshall Street, and her name's Julie Chase. She and I have been friends since she was 1 year old and I was 2 years old.
Wow. That's a long time.
I know.
So, have you made friends? Have you made friends at the college at all?
Well, there are certain people who do talk to me who like me. It's just hard to know everybody's name right now because I have to listen to the interpreter the whole time because I'm paying attention to the sign language.
Right.
And it's too noisy to talk with others because nobody else knows enough signs to talk to me with. Except for a few of the teachers do, but some of them don't know the same as I do. My brother uses the bad words. I think I don't want that.
So, when you see your best friend, is it Julie? Did you say her name?
We have not seen each other since graduation.
Oh.
Yeah, that was back in 1996, right before my graduation.
Oh.
When I had a party over at my aunt's house. My aunt used to live 2 houses down the street.
Oh, I see.
So I just want to finish with just a reminder, if you would go to the SurveyMonkey and do an evaluation for us. But I also want to point out the fact that for all of us, if we can't make a mistake, we can't make anything. And person-centered plans are also about making mistakes. We will make mistakes, and we hope that we'll catch them and change them. And the nice thing, if we continue to review them more regularly, especially a person-centered plan, I think that there are more chances for us to go, maybe we're going down the wrong road on this. And here's a young woman who says, you know, I don't have lots of friends. And in fact, she really only commented about one, and she's never seen that one since graduation. And every person-centered plan, I went back and looked at about 13 of them. Every one that I had a copy of, there was some comment in the person-centered plan about the need for the student to have an opportunity to communicate or interact with peers so that isolation would not become the way of their life. And this young woman has quite an isolated life at this point. And once again, I'm not blaming the parent. She wasn't the only one involved, and there were lots of things all of us maybe could have done differently. So with that, I'm going to end today. I'm sorry we're over a couple minutes, but hopefully that'll help and answer the evaluation for us, and we'll get out the PowerPoint, and also there's an article that's referenced in the references that I am going to send you some information on within about the next week. We have to update a couple things before I send it. So with that, thanks a lot. Kristen, great to see you. Hope this was helpful. Thanks to the rest of you guys for participating. We appreciate it. Bye.